The courtroom was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that wraps around you like a thick fog. Captain Elias Morgan stood at the front, his boots clicking sharply on the polished floor as he faced the judge. His face was a mask of determination, but beneath it, his eyes betrayed the weight of the moment. His hands, though steady, clenched at his sides, betraying his nerves. Before him stood Thunder, his warhorse, strong, proud and still as a statue, his dark eyes locked onto Elias, with a quiet understanding only those who had served together could grasp. Thunder had saved his life more times than he could count, yet today Elias was forced to fight for his best friend, his family. The air in the room was thick with tension. What would happen next? Would the bond they shared be enough to win against the law that viewed Thunder as nothing more than property? Captain Elias Morgan stood tall, his military uniform worn but sharp, a mark of his years of service. At 38, Elias had seen and endured more than most men in their lifetimes. His body bore the scars of countless battles, but the most lasting marks were not the ones on his skin. They were the ones etched into his heart, and those scars were all tied to a single, unwavering companion: Thunder. Thunder was not just a horse to Elias. He was family. When Elias had first laid eyes on him, the horse was just a colt, too young to carry the weight of war, but there was something about the way Thunder looked at him. A silent understanding passed between them. From the very first training session, Elias knew Thunder would be different. They were a perfect pair, Elias, a soldier accustomed to the chaos of battle, and Thunder, a creature of instinct and loyalty, born to run beside him through the worst of storms. The first time they truly tested each other was in the heat of battle. Elias had been pinned down during a reconnaissance mission, the enemy's fire too intense for him to break cover. The odds were stacked against him, and his soldiers were scattered. That's when Thunder had charged in, weaving through bullets with a speed that defied belief. He'd reached Elias, and with a mighty nudge, forced him onto his back and galloped him out of danger, his hooves pounding the earth with a power that sent fear into the hearts of their enemies. From that day on, Thunder was Elias's lifeline. In every mission, every operation, Thunder was there, leading the charge, standing by his side, and saving his life in ways no human could. Their bond went beyond the battlefield. It was a connection that had saved lives, healed wounds, and overcome insurmountable odds. But the time had come for Elias to retire. At the end of his decorated career, his dreams were simple: peace, rest, and the chance to live the remaining years of his life without the constant weight of war on his shoulders. His service had ended, and he was granted his retirement. But there was one issue. Thunder, the horse he'd fought beside, was still considered military property. Despite all the blood they'd shed together, Thunder was not allowed to stay by Elias's side. Military regulations deemed him equipment, a tool of war to be auctioned off once no longer needed. The thought of losing Thunder was something Elias couldn't accept. He had spent months filing appeals, writing letters, and making every attempt to prove that Thunder was more than a piece of military gear. Thunder wasn't just a horse. He was a partner, a brother in arms, and Elias's only true family. Now, in this courtroom, the final battle was about to begin. Elias stood tall once again, but this time he was fighting not for his country, not for medals, but for the one being who had stood beside him through it all. As the judge prepared to make his ruling, Elias's heart beat faster than ever. Would the law see the bond he shared with Thunder, or would they be torn apart? This was more than just a fight for a horse. It was a fight for loyalty, friendship, and love, the kind that transcends the battlefield and lasts forever. And Elias was ready to risk everything to ensure Thunder would never be taken from him. The courtroom had descended into an almost suffocating silence. Elias Morgan sat at the defendant's table, hands folded tightly in front of him, his body poised but his mind racing. His lawyer, Daniel Hayes stood beside him, passionately making his case, but Elias knew the real fight was ahead. His eyes never left Thunder, who stood just beyond the witness stand, calm yet alert, his strong form a reminder of everything Elias had fought for. Thunder had been more than just a horse. He had been his partner, his protector, his family. The bond they shared was undeniable. But would that be enough to sway the judge? "Your Honor," Daniel began, his voice calm but unwavering, "what we are asking for is not simply an exception based on sympathy. This is about the bond between a soldier and his horse, a bond that has saved lives and created a partnership like no other. Captain Morgan did not fight beside Thunder because it was a duty. He fought because Thunder was his family. To call this horse equipment is an insult not only to Captain Morgan's service, but to the very nature of their connection." Judge Bradley sat back in his chair, his eyes narrowed, giving nothing away. "Mr. Hayes," he began, his voice cold, "I understand your client's feelings, but the law is clear. Thunder is not a family member. He is military property, an asset of the United States government, and the law mandates that such assets are auctioned off once no longer needed." Elias felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Every word the judge spoke felt like a hammer pounding on his chest. He had fought in countless battles, seen death up close, and yet nothing compared to this. Losing Thunder felt like losing a part of his soul. He opened his mouth to speak, but hesitated, feeling the weight of every set of eyes on him. "Your Honor," he finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm, "I understand the law. I do. But Thunder is not just a horse. He is the one thing in this world that I can trust completely. I didn't ask for this bond. We didn't choose it, but it's there, and I can't just walk away from it. Thunder has been with me through everything, the toughest missions, the darkest days. He's not an object. He's my partner. He's my family." The judge leaned forward, tapping his fingers on the desk. "Captain Morgan," he said, his tone still sharp, "this court has heard your side, but the law does not allow for exceptions. The regulations are in place for a reason. We cannot make a ruling based on personal feelings." Elias's heart pounded in his chest as the words echoed in his mind. He wanted to shout, to demand that they see the truth, that Thunder was more than just a horse, but he knew better than to let his emotions rule him here. This was not the battlefield. He had to hold it together. He glanced at Thunder, whose calm demeanor seemed to match his own, but Elias knew the horse could feel the same tension. They were in this together. The opposition lawyer, Richard Sloane, stood now, adjusting his glasses, ready to make his case. His voice was precise, his tone unwavering as he spoke. "The law is clear, Your Honor. The military is not in the business of sentimental attachments. Captain Morgan's connection to this horse, while commendable, does not change the fact that Thunder is government property. There are no exceptions in this case. He will be auctioned, and that is the end of it." Each word felt like a blow, each syllable aimed directly at Elias's heart. He wanted to shout at Sloane, to demand the recognition of everything Thunder had done. But the courtroom was too cold, too clinical for emotion. The law was the law. Elias sat back, his hands trembling beneath the table, trying to control the anger and desperation rising within him. He could not let them take Thunder. The thought of the horse, who had been by his side through everything, being sold off like an object, tore at his very being. Was the bond they shared truly meaningless in the eyes of the law? His chest tightened, but Elias refused to break. He had fought alongside Thunder, trusted him with his life, and would continue to do so. He knew it wasn't about winning. It was about making them understand, about showing them that Thunder wasn't just another asset. He was more than that. He was the heart of everything Elias had survived. As Elias looked at Thunder once more, the weight of the moment pressed down on him. He couldn't lose this battle, not for himself, not for Thunder. The stakes were too high. The room waited, silent, as the judge leaned back in his chair, preparing to make his decision. Would they honor the bond between soldier and horse, or would they fall victim to the cold machinery of the law? Elias held his breath, his entire future and thunders resting on the judge's next words. The tension in the courtroom had reached a boiling point. Elias sat on the edge of his seat, his hands clenched into fists, the weight of the moment bearing down on him. The judge had just dismissed the opposition's lawyer, and now it was Elias's turn to speak. His throat was dry, his heart pounding, but he knew this was the moment. "Your Honor, all I ask is that you understand the bond I share with Thunder." Elias began, his voice thick with emotion. "We fought side by side through wars, through heartache, through things no human should have to face. He has saved my life more times than I can count. He is not a piece of military equipment. He is my brother in arms, my partner, and if you strip that away, you're not just taking my horse, you're taking a part of my soul." There was a heavy silence in the room, as if the air itself had thickened with the weight of his words. The judge sat unmoved, his expression unreadable. But something in the room shifted. It wasn't just the words Elias spoke, it was the emotion that radiated from him, the pure, raw truth that hung in the air. The bond between them was undeniable. Thunder stood quietly beside Elias, tethered to his handler, but something was different. His head was raised higher, his eyes locked on Elias with a deep, knowing gaze. It was as if the horse, too, understood the gravity of the moment. The room held its breath. And then, without warning, Thunder took a step forward. The room fell, deathly silent. The court officers who had been watching the scene closely began to stir, preparing to intervene. But before they could react, Thunder broke free from his handler's grip. He moved toward Elias, his hooves clicking softly against the polished floor, his powerful form moving with purpose. The courtroom gasped in unison. The guards stepped forward, but the judge raised a hand to stop them. Every eye in the room was fixed on Thunder as he approached Elias, his dark eyes filled with an emotion that was almost human. Slowly, Thunder lowered his head and nudged Elias gently with his muzzle, his breath warm against the soldier's chest. Elias stood frozen, his body trembling with a mixture of disbelief and overwhelming emotion. Thunder had always been brave, but this was different. The horse wasn't just standing by his side. He was choosing him. "Your Honor," Elias whispered, his voice barely audible. "I don't need to say anything more." Thunder has already spoken. A ripple of gasps moved through the courtroom. It was an unprecedented moment. No one had ever seen anything like it. The emotional connection between soldier and horse was now tangible, undeniable. Thunder wasn't just a war horse. He was a living testament to loyalty, sacrifice, and love. The judge sat frozen in his seat, his expression a mixture of shock and awe. The courtroom was still. The air was thick with emotion. Elias's eyes glistened with unshed tears as he reached up and ran his hand through Thunder's mane. The horse stood quietly, as if aware of the magnitude of the moment. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before the judge finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "Captain Morgan," he began, his eyes still fixed on the horse. "This is extraordinary. The bond you share with Thunder is clear, as is your dedication to him. I have never witnessed anything like this in my courtroom." Elias's heart skipped a beat. The room waited, holding its collective breath. The judge's next words would change everything. "I am inclined to rule in favor of the defendant," the judge continued, his voice shaking slightly. "The bond between you and Thunder is undeniable. I'm not blind to that. And while the law is strict, I believe this is a unique case, one that deserves special consideration. Elias could hardly breathe as he waited for the final judgment. The entire courtroom held its breath, the air thick with suspense. Would the judge follow through with his statement? Would he grant Elias the custody of Thunder? Thunder stood by Elias, his head resting gently against the soldier's chest, as if to reassure him. And in that moment, Elias knew he had won. Not just the case, but something far more significant, a bond that no law could ever sever. The judge leaned forward, his voice steady. "I hereby grant Captain Elias Morgan full custody of Thunder, his loyal warhorse." The courtroom erupted in a chorus of applause. It was more than just a legal victory. It was a triumph of loyalty, love, and the unbreakable bond between a soldier and his horse. Elias's chest heaved with emotion, tears streaming down his face. He reached out to Thunder, pulling him into a tight embrace. They had fought together, survived together, and now they would go home together. As Elias walked out of the courtroom, Thunder by his side, the weight of the moment settled in. They had won. The bond between them was stronger than ever, and nothing, no law, no regulation, could ever break it. It was just the two of them now, ready to face the world together, side by side. The courtroom was still buzzing with the sound of applause, but Elias barely heard it. His hands were shaking as he reached out for Thunder, whose steady presence had been his anchor throughout the battle. The reality of the judge's decision had not fully sunk in yet. He stood frozen for a moment, as if waiting for someone to tell him it wasn't real. But the cheers, the faces of the onlookers, the emotional outpouring from the courtroom, everything told him that it was. The judge's gavel had struck down in favor of Elias. But the most important part of the decision had already been made. Thunder was his, not as military property, not as an asset to be auctioned off, but as his partner, his family, the one creature who had stood by him through the darkest moments of his life. The weight of that truth hit Elias all at once. His chest tightened, and the tears he had held back for so long began to spill over. He turned slowly to face Thunder, who was still standing calmly beside him, a silent witness to this incredible moment. "Thank you, buddy," Elias whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I knew we'd get through this." Thunder's ears flicked back, and for a brief second he seemed to nudge Elias's shoulder, almost as if to say, "I knew we would too." The crowd's cheers faded into the background as Elias walked slowly toward Thunder, their reunion so perfectly timed that it felt like the culmination of a long journey, a shared history of trust and survival. As Elias placed his hand gently on Thunder's muzzle, his heart swelled with gratitude. This was the moment they had fought for, the moment that would change everything. The applause from the courtroom was no longer just for the decision. It was for the bond that had been witnessed by everyone present. "I will never forget this, Thunder," Elias said softly, tears streaming freely down his face now. "Never." The crowd, too, seemed moved by the sight of the retired soldier and his loyal warhorse. There was something raw, something powerful, about the way they stood together, reunited after years of service and sacrifice. The applause grew louder, some people even wiping tears from their eyes. The room was filled with emotion, as if everyone could feel the weight of what had just happened. But it wasn't about the crowd, it wasn't about the applause. It was about this moment, just Elias and Thunder, the soldier and his horse, standing side by side once again. The finality of the decision brought them a sense of peace they had longed for. As Elias led Thunder out of the courtroom, the world outside seemed quieter, more serene. Thunder's strong hooves echoed on the courthouse steps, and for the first time in years, Elias felt lighter, free from the burden of uncertainty. It wasn't just a legal victory. It was the triumph of something far deeper, a bond that had been forged in the fires of war, tested by time, and ultimately validated in a place where laws are made. When they reached the parking lot, Elias paused and looked at Thunder with a smile that spoke volumes. "We're going home now," he said, and Thunder nickered softly in response, as if in agreement. Together, they walked away from the courthouse into a new chapter of their lives, a chapter where they would no longer be separated by laws or regulations, but would remain partners together, as they always had been. And in that moment, Elias knew one thing beyond a shadow of a doubt, no matter where life took them next. Their bond would never be broken. It was a bond that no one, not even the law, could ever take away. The courtroom had seen a victory, but outside, in the world that awaited them, Elias and Thunder shared a victory that was even greater, a victory of loyalty, love, and the unbreakable bond between a soldier and his horse. As they walked into the sunset together, Elias knew that no matter the battle, some bonds are meant to last forever. Comment on the importance of relationships. In a world that often values things over feelings, this story is a reminder that some relationships, no matter how unconventional, are meant to last forever. It shows us that love, loyalty, and the bonds we form with others can transcend boundaries, even those set by laws and regulations. Question to the audience to ponder. What would you fight for? And who would you fight beside? Sometimes the strongest bond is the one that cannot be broken by law or reason. In a world where connections are often fleeting, how far would you go to protect the ones that truly matter?